Hey everybody, welcome to Ask Anything with Todd, Burnham, and Phil McCarthy from Burnham Law. We're here to talk about the economics and performance aspects of a law firm, running a law firm, and really the goal in discussing these things is to express in a way that's transparent for our clients to see that these are the things we think of. This is how we think about providing a high-level service, and it starts with the efficiencies that we create. Right?
That's right. So, we've talked about how to create a business to get to break even, and then we say what gets us to profit with excellence.
Yep.
Right? Sometimes firms talk about the client journey, the client experience, mutually exclusive from the economic layouts of the company, right? But we're going to point out today is how those two things come together.
Right. Well, and we started to give a little background. We started Ask Anything really with this concept of how is it operating right now? It's an inventory. And for our purposes, we started looking at AI and saying, how can we implement AI here? And what it opened up for us was a lot of leaks in our processes and our workflows.
It is to ask a lot of questions about our business.
Right. And so what we realized through our experience in building a law firm is that the way that we're trying to work right now is vertical integration, right? So it's the same processes and procedures, and most importantly, client experience. No matter where you go, think of it like a McDonald's. A Big Mac always tastes the same wherever you go, right? But vertical integration is you have multiple different offices, and we're talking about expansion or something, but they're all based on the same intakes foundation, which then gives you the concept of the same culture. So you're looking at a skyscraper, as opposed to a bunch of bungalows, more silos, right? Different offices with different intakes for everyone, which results in different culture throughout different places. And so then you find yourself competing with offices rather than competing with yourself.
And then best practices don't typically get shared as efficiently and quickly as they should. Right. And we allow inefficiencies to last a lot longer than they do in the scenario of the bungalow.
And we've experienced that.
Yeah.
Right? So when you have one common messaging, one common theme. You have leaders that are all working throughout the skyscraper, and the elevator actually is really the client experience, right? Every little touch point, which we'll get into next. But I think the biggest thing is when you start looking at your leakage, once you do that and you plug your leakage, then you want to look and say, what does this firm want to be and what is our focus, right? What is the goal and how can we get from... We talked before about the 80% billing rate when you're doing 100% of actual work and making it more dialed in and more efficient because that impacts the client experience. Right?
That's right. So that's a way that lots of firms start by looking at the economics, cleaning up the economics, right? But you can't forget the second part of this, which is that client journey. And it's really telling, if we pay attention to excellence and efficiencies for the client journey, and they see consistencies, and the last person that came through and was serviced this way, the next person can count on that. The efficiencies around reviews, around outcomes, around the intakes, the follow-up, the billing, the communication, it just accelerates the economics as well. So what we wanted to talk about today was both of those and how we bring those things together, the client journey and the economics, and not keeping them mutually exclusive.
And I think that you can have the best intentions when you're starting out and you have multiple offices, and you just can't help but things end up going a certain way. So it's like you want to make sure that the messaging starts from the culture that you've created and not just this hierarchy of one. And I think that even if you don't want that hierarchy of one, if you don't have a vertical integration of your culture, then you can't help but have that kind of silo effect.
That's right. And I think it starts with our branding and our reputation and the way we put ourselves into the community. We have a website that represents who we are and our values. So we'd like all of our sections of our business to represent those same values.
100%. And you can't necessarily do that when you have siloed effects, right? It's just so hard, especially think about it when you're remote working. It's the same kind of concept. So to create this in a hybrid environment is really challenging but doable. So it works if you work it.
That's it. So let's talk about, I think a lot of us start, Todd, when in this scenario right here, right? We're just scrambling. We're building
bungalows.
In the bungalow. So let's say, how do we get here? And then how do we reshape this to this? What are some of the things we do? Because the goal is that we build this tower.
Right. You want the skyscraper approach and not the... Think about it in this way, too. If you have multiple different intakes of multiple different locations of the same firm, right, then you're having different messaging going from different places, right? So what you want to be doing, I think, is always, and what I've learned through failure, is when you're opening new offices, you don't want to have different intakes. You want to have one intakes department that's feeding everyone else, because I think the messaging starts with the culture, and that creates that environment that's going to be consistent.
That's really fair.
Right.
In my old world, this was a really simple layout, right? I had companies, I had stores in 4 different states, and they were separate S-corps so that I could run them cleanly. But what I'm looking at is the challenge there is not to have it set up like this, the bungalow system, where each state is its own systems, right? And some are better than others, and some demanded markets are stronger than others.
Well, and there you were doing goods rather than services, too.
That's right. So it's slightly different, but you can see how someone would set this up. It's not a mistake. It is an easy way to say, hey, here's Arizona, and here's Colorado, and then maybe here's DR work, and here's civil, and here's probate. And you can see how breaking that out like that creates the thought of, let's make it efficient, let's make it work.
In the beginning,
You're right.
In the beginning, it is going to work, but then you can't, unless there's oversight, consistent training, which is non-billable and not necessary. You want people to feel autonomous in how they operate. And so if you have that kind of approach, or if you have it and it's not with that, then you can't help but be...
There's a fracture. And
eventually it's going to show.
And the fracture is in part the leadership.
Yeah,
communication,
and there can be
right?
good intentions with people that are not used to being leaders, or there's not a consistent message from the leadership group in general. It's all about communication, right?
Yep.
And consistent training, consistent investment, and most importantly, putting people in a position to succeed. And that's why we look at this from a skyscraper standpoint initially, right? Start there, rather than this bungalow effect, even though bungalows are easier. Like skyscrapers are harder, but they're sustainable.
Yeah. And moving from this shape to this shape over time is worth the effort. It's worth the challenge, because what you get in the end is something that's a lot easier to manage, lead, work within, and create consistency.
Which the whole thing that we're trying to do is increase and optimize the client experience and the client outcome, right?
Yes.
Which goes to your touch points.
Yep.
What do you got there?
So when we think about the client experience, what we're talking about there is, how do we build trust for our client? How do we originally get them to trust us enough to pick up a phone and dial into us, to give us a chance to speak to being the best solution to their problem.
Right.
And then secondly, with the next punch is follow-up and handoffs, billing clarity, case updates, how we close, outcomes that come from those closings. So every area where the client is serviced is an opportunity to create excellence or fragmentation, right?
Yep.
And it also is an area, most importantly, to create trust. And the
100%.
deeper trust we build, the more it supports building our skyscraper, and great reviews, great referrals, stronger, deeper reviews, right? And I think that sets up that whole system for way more success. And then the economics kind of fall in behind it.
Well, and I think that if you're, and we talked about it before, is money chases service, right?
Yes.
So if we're just constantly focused on service, then you are automatically led to the things that you can control, right? The things you can control are the processes that the client undergoes, the systems that they're exposed to, and the preparation for the outcome that they are looking for. All of those things, if you're looking at trying to get better every single day in the way that you're representing clients, you're naturally going to end up looking at your efficiencies.
That's right.
That's just normal. And so trying to increase the touch point value rather than putting it so much in humans' hands. We're trying to optimize the process, not reduce the work, the people that are working in the firm. If you have more touch points and they're more automated, then you're going to end up having more human-to-human contact, because there's going to be more contact coming in. Right? So it's like you think that AI is going to, or workflows are going to do one thing, when in reality you might need more support staff, which is great.
Yep, that's right.
It's better client experience.
Right,
That's the deal.
that's great. Now, again, when we look at intakes, follow-up, handoffs, billing clarity, case updates, and closing, that's almost what we're calling out here is in the skyscraper. This example would be me going up the elevator. So I really think that the line between these, the pass-off, the handoff between these is what creates the consistency. And where people, it's a derailer when you get it wrong. So maybe we talk about some of the connections between intakes, the next floors, and follow-up.
Sure.
How fast we can set efficiencies around, hey, you get 5 minutes and we'll get to a call. Then you get a lawyer within 24 hours to talk to you, right?
Right.
So talk to me about some of those efficiencies because that's us moving to the next floor.
Well, I think that you want to have a consistent, think about you're scaling a mountain and you're constantly nailing in your bases or your anchors. And every time that you're scaling a mountain, it's one more transition of a client, and you have to make sure that the anchor is solid, right?
Yes.
Otherwise, it falls, right? You're going to fall. So there has to be, and in those moments, it's not automations, it's not workflows, it's not AI, it's empathy. Did you hire correctly in the intakes department to make sure that those people are not transaction-based, but they're emotion-based, and they're invested in people getting best representation? Those are the kind of people that you want, right? And so those things are shown. As you optimize the process, more human-to-human contact occurs. And as a result, you want to make sure those people are top level, meaning they just give a shit, right?
Yeah.
And if you can find people that give a shit, then you're going to do really well in the intakes because you can't fake giving a shit.
That's right. In the hospital example, it's handing the clipboard off when your shift is over and having the patient's health be the priority.
And the patients
Right.
see that there's actual connection between that process and that they feel like the experience is one that's efficient,
Yes.
not delayed, not overburdened, not overbilled, just getting it done with strategy as the foundation.
And then every time that they find a touch point, they're not starting over with the new person.
Another anchor, and if there is any start over, for whatever point there's any overlap, that person's not billed, it's the experience, right?
Yeah.
It's the experience. And speaking of billing, you have to be realistic about the quality of your law firm when you start looking at billing, right? And you look at hourly rates. I think that there's an obligation to look into the community and look at the billing rates in your area and of your competitors, and then be realistic about how good you are, right? Don't go bill $500 an hour when you're 2 years out of law school and you don't know how to do a trial, right? Then you're just churning. And that's not a place that you want to be at. That's not a place where you're going to grow from. You want to look at this and be like honorable, right?
That's it. And you really can't grow off of that lack of reputation, right?
No.
So if you're harming your reputation, you can't grow off of that. So all of this,
Money chases service.
that's exactly it. And then now here's what we're doing is laying out how that happens.
Right,
How,
and
how does
every time-
money chase service? Well, because it creates the efficiencies around who we actually bring through our business.
Right.
We look at all of these parts individually, separately.
Yep.
Fun, step one.
Yep.
So look at your intakes process, look at your follow-up process, look at your handoff, right?
Yep.
Then what you and I are talking about is now go back. You can't just stop there. That creates the bungalow event. It's the line between them we were just addressing
Right.
that stacks it and makes it more of a skyscraper.
That's right. And if you look at the client touch points and you're focusing on intakes, and if you have that bungalow with a bunch of different intakes, that's inefficiency, right? Heaven forbid that someone actually goes to a different office and it's a different vibe, right? You just can't have that. And that matters. Your trust and credibility and authority is established through the contact and the connections, not necessarily the outcome. It's the process and the experience, feeling that everyone is prepared, right? And it starts with the first contact in that intakes department. I think it's the most important department you have in a firm.
Typically, you wouldn't think of it that way,
No.
but it is the first client contact, and it's not potentially your greatest lawyer solving their problems through their strengths, right? It's people that need to care and care about that person first.
Absolutely, right. And the care continues. So you're showing care by billing clarity, giving case updates, communicating in a way that's not in a form, but it's informative.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's impactful. It's less than 6 minutes to write. So it's point one. It's not point two. Just give the update. Boom. Just those kinds of things. One-way communication updating is really important. And the client just feels like they're in charge and they're in control because they're educated and they're updated what's going on.
One of the important adjustments that I talk to a lot of lawyers in our firm, and one of the adjustments they've made in this regard is to ask their clients, how do you like to be communicated with? What does good communication look like for you? And how often do you like to be communicated on your case updates?
Right.
Some people like that less because they're concerned about the billing, right? But other people will lay out for you if the way they like it and the rhythm around that and the timing around that. And if you deliver on what they're looking for, their expectations, it just builds way more trust. And they created the efficiency for us. We just have to follow what they're looking for. But it does require asking and listening generously.
Well, that goes hand in hand with sales. And these are just the common core concepts that permeate throughout our process, right? And so on our website is we listen, we think, you win, right? It always starts with listening, right? So we're listening in multiple different places because that's how you become more and more informed. And that's part of culture too. All of these things are part of our processes become who we are because it's how we think and why we do what we do. That's culture, right?
Yeah.
And so when everyone's aligned or going in a certain direction, you develop momentum and everyone wants to keep getting better and stacking bricks.
That's it. Some of the important conversations I've had, I share them because if you're in these conversations, it's just an extra perspective that you could adopt, borrow, take, and make better. But when we are talking to clients, we're listening to put ourselves on the same team. Then we're using our authority to say, here's going to be my role. Here's how I'm going to play in the team. And then here are the things that help you, that you could do on our team to lead to high probability of successful outcomes. So we listen to get on the same team, but then we identify what role we're both going to play. 2, we lay out the plan for them. And then 3, we communicate the case updates from there. But that initial setup of who we are, what role we both play to lead to success, setting out the plan that we're going to deliver, and then case updates, that's best case.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
And it's just basic, but it's like just the little bits of communicating goes a long way. And if you can do that on a consistent basis, then you establish calm for the client.
That's right.
Because knowledge is power, right? And when you're guessing and you don't have answers and you don't want to contact your lawyer because you don't want to keep getting billed, those kinds of things, point 1 every week is the most valuable contact point you can have. Give me 5 minutes.
Right. And again, first of all, we want to step in and say, I'm an authority and I'm a great team member for you, and you found the right people. But to get there, you got to have a little bit of patience, right? You got to teach them. You've got to first set the priority of who's important here and who's the hero. Yep. And then secondly, then establish your authority. So many times we're trying to figure out authority first, plan later, trust later. And I think that what we found the most success in is, nope, listen first, get on the same team, establish your authority.
Well, and if you're listening, you can actually understand more where that client is. You take them where they find them, and then you can actually bring them along a little bit more and more. And remember, you've already vetted the client, so that person's not going to be someone that's out for blood or just revenge. We just don't operate with those people, right? And so if you're operating in that way, in just a strategic way, trying to get to the outcome that is fair and in the client's best interest in conjunction with their goals and their needs, if you're just communicating a little bit here and there, you're gold.
Oh, that's great. Let's talk about some of the floors. How in the Skyscraper, how do the floors line up? That's how we can scale, and that's how we can grow.
Well, I think about scaling in 2 different ways, right? So if you look, I saw a picture of Denver the other day in 1880 or so. It was just all flat, right?
Yeah.
And you have the Front Range. And then I look at a picture of Denver now, and it's like skyscrapers. And I start thinking of the concept of the overhead that, and we're talking about efficiencies and talking about culture. It comes with vertical integration, with everything is aligned and working on the same system or the same network, right? And more importantly, for our purposes, and we're trying to just have a healthy business, if everything is on a foundation that doesn't include additional overhead, then that additional overhead, the additional rent here and there, you can have those things in different places, but you also can have a hybrid model where you have smaller office space, but they're all integrated so it's the same experience no matter where you go. And so when I think about it, started with the idea of keeping overhead by going vertical. You're stacking on top of already existing foundations, so you're not having to, it's not an MSO model. You're not having all these different offices in one. And so you want to be able to create that. So in the future, if you want to, you can change the structure that you want, but it's still vertical integration.
That's totally fair. So one marketing system, one leadership system, right?
Everything. You
right.
can't and even if you have different offices, I think that consolidated intakes department really sets the tone for the vibe and the messaging and the culture that you have. The intakes really starts everything.
Does that scales our admin systems, right? And people, they can have more touch points when we're organized in this way.
100%.
Right? Or it isn't like, hey, I get 4 hours here. The same 4 hours delivers.
If you're doing that, then you're looking at those touch points as ways of, how do I optimize this experience? Because when you have just humans in nature, we're busy, we're going from one thing to another, and if you don't have an automated system, one, that outlines your efficiencies, you're going to miss things, right? It's human nature to miss things because you get busy. So having these touch points are at integral pieces or times in the process, because typically all we've done at this point has had written communication that's been automated.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And it's consistent messaging. And so when you do have that follow-up, it's going to be boom. You're mirroring the messaging that's been consistent throughout the Skyscraper here. It's good stuff.
That's really good stuff.
All right, man. What do you think?
I think that's awesome, and I'm hoping that we are getting you in a place where you can act on what we're modeling and teaching, so that in your own firms or in your own performance delivery, you're looking at places that you can make improvements, right? And one place is, if I'm just a lawyer, not a business owner, then if I create a great client experience, so if I create the elevator experience of a lifetime, I am leading towards high performance and high economic outcomes. I am leading to the health of the business. So there's a way for me to say, hey, if I want to be the best, how could I be the best and how does the team win? Well, another way to look at that is to say, hey, push yourself, find out what's possible, and really focus in on the journey of the client, and those lead to the efficiencies as well.
Well, and people ask, why are you going through all these processes and talking about teaching other firms how to do things better, right? And here's the answer, is that when you are transparent in the way that you think as a company or a business, and you talk about the efficiencies of work in that client experience, we believe that that kind of transparency lends itself to credibility, trust, and authority. Even though we're assuming that people know that we provide excellent legal services. This is our why, right? And I think that people are connected to why businesses operate a certain way. And I think that a lot of other law firms should do this. Instead of just selling, be transparent in your processes. Show people how you think and why you think, and why we're talking about efficiencies that lead to firm economics, because it's transparent.
That's right.
This is how you stay alive. This is how you take care of the people that work really hard for the clients, right? Is you have firm economics and you understand that win rate equals better economics. So the people that are working for you have to be the best, and that's your starting point. Hire people and pay them well, right? That's your starting point for a really transparent and predictable service with high win rates for clients.
The other thing I wanted to add is, we're not trying to position ourselves as experts. What we're trying to show you is that by exposing your vulnerabilities, but your great intentions, a lot can come out of being able to find excellence. Being able to find being an expert. So when we look at our business, we're just trying to get it better. So the more that we talk about it, teach it, share it, get challenged, get feedback, find best practice, we're just constantly just little by little getting better and better. So
and it's really just digging. It's not like
digging and asking.
We're not rocket scientists here. We're just looking, right? Trying to figure out where our leakage was to begin with, and then what are we trying to build here? What do we have as a structure? What's not working, and constantly trying to get better. And I think that if you do that in your business and in your life, that's a life worth living, and it's one of struggle and growth. And
right.
I can dig with that.
And then in the end, you're not in compromise with servicing a client, and being a great lawyer, and making money.
That's it.
All those things come together.
Good stuff.
Yep. Nice.
All right, man. See you guys next week. Ask anything with Todd and Phil. Catch you next week.